All right, everyone, this is Alex. We're going to wait just maybe another 60 seconds to let people get into the webinar, and then we will begin. All right, it's 1:03. I think it's about time to get started. So I want to welcome everyone to our weekly or bi-weekly edition of Kineo Office Hours. My name is Alex Carrick. I am a platforms consultant here at Kineo, and today sitting at our sunny office in Chicago. And want to welcome you to our office hours session. So this is where we spend a few minutes, 15, 20 minutes talking about a particular topic or feature within Totara, and then opening it up to questions that may be out there. So today we are going to talk about user tours. So user tours is a great feature that was added in Totara 10 that saw a few improvements in Totara 11. And a user tour, and you may have seen this on many other websites, allows you to create pop-up dialogues on your site to provide information or highlight certain areas of your site. So this is really great when it comes to a dashboard or the front page login page. Basically, being able to highlight different areas. Here's where you would click to do this. Here's where you would click to do that, to provide that great user experience for people that may not be as technologically inclined as other users. So we're talking about what a user tour is. I'm going to show you how you create one. We're going to walk through what different settings and options you have. And as well as you can get a little bit more technical with things, and I'll show you how to do that as well. So I'm going to go to a demo site. So you'll see that I already have a user tour up and ready to go. So I have in the middle of the page, welcome to my Totara sandbox. I click next. It's going to point me directly to a link for the record of learning. I'm going to go down the navigation bar to team, go to find learning, talk about the administration tab here in the middle, as well as being able to give some additional advice on how to repeat the tour. And then I end my tour and I go about my experience as a user. So that's what a user tour is. Now, when it comes to how to create one and how to do that, as a system administrator or someone with the correct permissions, I'm going to go to the system administration block. And because user tours are a newer feature, it is, I believe, still technically considered under development. So down here at the very bottom, you'll see development, and it is also given the classification of experimental. So when we click experimental, you'll see here that user tours is our very last option down there. When I click this, you'll see that I have my tour that we just went through already loaded up, ready to go. It should look pretty familiar to you in terms of how things work with it being enabled and being visible and having the option to import, export, and delete. So let's start at a very basic level at starting from scratch. So if I start a new tour, you're going to name your tour, to keep things straight. You can give it a description if you'd like. Then you have to tell the system which page you want this user tour to appear on. So one of my favorite Totara features overall is just the help menus. And this is what's going to help guide you in where you may want to go. So it gives you a few options here when it comes to if it's a specific dashboard, if it's a course, if it's a forum, if it's a user profile. If you're like me and going through and trying to create one for a home page and trying every combination of things to get one on your home page, I recommend reading the last line of the help box, that if you want to create the site homepage, you just need to say front page. You don't need to be too creative with anything else that goes on within the URL. So once you tell the system where you want your user tour, you can click to enable it, and I guess I may as well just go through this. Let's call this demo user tour. Usually helps to only have one R. Let's we'll call this front page for lack of a better option, since I already have one on the dashboard. I'm going to enable it. When it comes to placement, so you'll notice when I was going through the user tour on the previous page that the pop-up windows displayed below the element that I was pointing at. So you'll see if you look at your placement options above, below, left, right, that's physically where that pop-up is going to display. You'll see that above and below are the two recommended options because they show up better on mobile. If the element, say, is on the far left side of the page and you choose left as an element, that you want that pop-up window to show to the left of your leftmost item, that box is going to replace into a more usable area. Next, you have the option of show if target is not found. So if for some reason, depending on your page, imagine if you have a user tour that goes through every course, right? Every time you go to a course page, it's going to show you this tour. And you have it pointing towards a certain block. But that block only shows up on a few pages. What this is asking is if that block, on the pages where the block is not present, do you still want to go through and show the message? So in that example, that would be no. If a certain course does not have the block that we are discussing, we don't want it to show the message. Show with backdrop. So what that means is basically, are you highlighting the segment that you are discussing, right? So the background goes a little dim, it causes your element to pop, kind of draws the eye with of your user to where you're trying to show them. And then we move to proceed on click, which, just like it sounds, if your user can click the page and that counts as advancing, that would be yes. If not, they would need to hit the next button within the pop-up itself. Then we move down to tour filters. So this is where things can get very fun. So you can have different tours created for different roles. So your home page or your front page may be different. You may have dynamic content based on a user's role. Your managers may see things that your frontline or normal users, authenticated users, do not see. So you can create specific roles for those users so that, maybe I have three user tours on my front homepage. One is for system administrators, showing them all the different system administrator functions. One might be for a staff manager to highlight some of the team aspects and team blocks of that subordinate relationship. And the last one might be just as an authenticated user. How do I navigate around the system? And all three of those tours could be on the same page. And then you can choose if you have multiple themes loaded. Maybe your page looks different depending on which theme if you're using multiple. Otherwise, all is usually a good bet. So when I click save, I'm going to be taken to a dashboard looking page. You'll see I've got my homepage tour, which is what I created before, and my demo user tour, which is what I just created. I'm going to go into my demo tour, and you'll see here that my demo tour currently is blank because we haven't created anything yet. One of the first things that you can do is look at the different default sections. So by default, this is going to look exactly like essentially what we just set up, and that is looking at your placement, your show if target isn't found, show if backdrop, proceed on click. Essentially just setting these as the default for your new steps that you're going to set up. So I can say below, no, yes, yes. We'll set that. Then when I go back into my demo tour, we are going to create a step. So each pop-up that we create is going to be a new step. So when we click into that, the first thing is we've got to determine what element we are targeting. So your option is you have a block, which is a physical block on the page that you've added. There is display in the middle of the page, which is the pop-up just appears in the middle. It's not necessarily pointing or highlighting anything. And then selector. So if there are elements, maybe those are links, maybe those are the navigation bar at the top, maybe that is the navigation icons and user profile picture up here. Obviously, those do not fall in the block or display in middle of the page category. So that becomes selector. So let's start with block. So if I hit block, you will see that when I click my drop down on block, I have my option of all the blocks as an administrator that I can have on a page. So it will automatically point to those correct blocks. When I select selector, you'll see that my blocks tab becomes unclickable, and I then go to my CSS selector. So this is going to be a little bit more technical, but I promise it's not as bad as it looks. So for example, let's use the profile picture up here at the top. If I wanted my first step of my user tour to be this picture, I need to figure out in computer language what this is referred to as. So this process may be a little bit different based on your browser. I'm currently using Firefox. But if I right click and I go all past all those things I'm used to using, and at the very bottom I have the option to inspect an element. So I click that, and this intimidating little menu pops up with a bunch of different colors and a bunch of different things that as an ordinary person you may not necessarily know what's going on. So when we do this, this is actually called, the inspect elements menu. When I go through and look and hover my mouse over the different lines of this code, it's actually going to highlight and show me exactly what that piece of code is looking at. And when we go through and are using this selector activity, what you're going to do is look for in pink where it says class equals. So you'll see that this says user picture. So within CSS is a technical language. You're going to start things with a period, and you'll see here that the class here is just user picture. So what we can do in our CSS selector is we're going to start with a period, and we're going to say user picture. So that's going to tell it that every time that all the requirements are met to show the pop-up, it's going to point at the user picture. And then I can label what I want my pop-up to actually tell my users. So my title might be user picture, hopefully spelled correctly. There we go. And then content, this is your user picture. You can upload a new picture by entering your profile. Bingo. So then we have the options. You'll see here, these look exactly the same as your the options we set by default. So you'll see here that the default options are listed on what you set before. So you can easily go through and set your defaults. You can also change that, obviously, based on desire. If you want to break away from the defaults for certain elements, you can do that. And then I'm going to hit save. So I've created my first step. I can create a different step. So my next pop-up might be pointing to the, let's say, record of learning. So when I inspect my record of learning, you'll see here a nice little tidbit here is a lot of times you'll see different spacing. You'll notice here in our class, it says our class equals Totara -menu-nav-item space menu-record of learning. So not only is that a mouthful to say on a webinar, it's a lot to type out. So usually it's the last string that is included in that class. So if I want to point to this record of learning, I'm going to change my selector, and this is going to be my period menu record of learning. And I type that out within Firefox, at least. If I wanted to, there is the ability here on the right hand side that you will see and be able to copy and paste that if there is some longer elements. But we would go through, and this would be record of learning, and this is your transcript of activities. Boom. And save. And so that's how you would go through and create a user tour. You'll notice here that the target here is our CSS selector. It's going to show me exactly what that is. If I want to change around, maybe I want the record of learning to display first, I can move that up and down the steps. One thing as you are testing this, or maybe you've created a user tour, everyone's gone through it, maybe you make some changes to your front page, say 6 months from now, and you want to update your user tour. You know, things have moved around, maybe links have changed, maybe people need to update something in their profile. Or if you're like me and you try to test things and it's not working and you need to be able to test your user tour again, you have this fun link here that says force the tour to be displayed to all users again. So that means is when I click this, myself and whoever else would be affected and impacted by the user tour would go through it again. So that's how you could redisplay that user tour to people that have already gone through it. If they have already gone through it and maybe they need to do it again, you'll notice that when I went to my page here, there's a link at the very bottom of your page that says reset user tour on this page. So I can click that, and you'll notice that I believe about halfway through my user tour, well, actually near the end of my user tour, I actually said that. I put that in the user tour that this user tour will only be displayed once. To view it again, click the link at the very bottom of the page. So that's a good best practice. A lot of times people will go to sites, try to click through that, and then come back a week later and be like, shoot, I wish I knew how to do that. So that's a way that you can push users in that direction. What I also mentioned as we were going through this, and actually I can show you that, so that homepage user, and I'll get the inspect elements out of there. So this is what that tour that we just went through on the demo site. looks like when it's all created. So I've given them titles, I've given them content. You'll see here that my target, you know, I either displayed it in the middle of the page. Here are all my CSS areas, and then display middle of the page. So I can go through and edit those. If I have, you know, maybe I've created a really great tour and I don't want to have to recreate it from scratch if I'm doing it for a different role or another page. That's where you do have the ability to export your user tours and then import them, just like you would back up and restore a course. So because I'm a nice guy, and I know that going into the inspect elements and the CSS does not come as primary nature to most people, I've gone through and made some cheat sheet guides for you on what those different CSS little codes that you would put into your user tour. Instead of scribbling these down frantically as I'm talking, they will be located in the video description on YouTube right below, so that you'll be able to copy and paste those and have access to them as well. So you'll see here, obviously, with things in that first bar, it's going to be just the dot menu and then the hyphen, and usually exactly what you're looking at. I referenced earlier maybe needing to show people where they would go to get to point out their profile. So you'll see I uploaded a self-portrait and gave you the different CSS abilities there on what you're going to point at. And again, these will be in the description of the YouTube video. As we go through, you know, if you're really struggling, you know, CSS and inspecting elements and getting through that isn't working out super well in your testing, and you're just frustrated, you know, reach out to myself, reach out to Taylor. We'd be happy to help you out to make sure we get those together. Because obviously improving that user experience and getting that user tour just right to provide that experience for the user of making their lives easier is obviously what we're hoping to do. So we are happy to try to make your life easier, to make your users' lives easier. So that is the long and short of user tours. So I hope that you have a great rest of your Thursday, and I hope you learned a little bit about user tours. If you have other CSS comments, if you've got questions, feel free to leave them as comments down below on the YouTube video. Otherwise, we are done with our session, and I will open it up to questions.